Okay, picture this. It's late afternoon, October 17th, 1989. San Francisco just got hit by a huge earthquake, 6.9 magnitude.
Yeah, I remember that one. The Loma Prieta earthquake.
Exactly. So there's this American economist, Andrew Rose. He's a professor up at UC Berkeley.
Right.
He's on the sixth floor of this old campus building, and the ground is shaking like crazy.
Terrifying.
So he does what you'd expect, dives under a doorframe, bracing himself. He looks over at his colleague, expecting her to do the same thing.
But she doesn't.
Nope, she just sits there at her desk, perfectly calm, unfazed, no screaming, no panic, just quiet composure.
And that colleague, let me guess.
That was Janet Yellen. Today, she's the U.S. Treasury Secretary. Before that, chair of the Federal Reserve.
Uh-huh. She's arguably, and I don't think this is an overstatement, the most powerful woman in the world today. And maybe the most influential female figure in American history.
That's a big claim. I mean, you think about Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House for years, or Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State.
Right. And Secretary of State is, what, third most important job in the U.S. government after President and VP?
Yeah. But Yellen's influence, it's different, isn't it? It's less about those really public political fights.
Exactly. It's more foundational. Economic policy, the flow of money, the value of the dollar. It's quieter, maybe, but you could argue it's much more pervasive, more enduring.
This puts her in a different league.
Completely.
Yeah.
And that's what we're really getting into today. This unprecedented economic showdown between her, Janet Yellen, and Russia's central bank governor, Elvira Nabiullina.
Right. Two incredibly powerful women, both known for being kind of reserved, quiet even, but hugely impactful.
Leading their country's economic strategies in this, well, global clash. It's unlike anything we've really seen before.
So let's start with Yellen, the architect, as you said, of this economic pressure campaign. That earthquake story, it kind of says it all about her character, doesn't it?
It really does. That composure, that calm under pressure, it seems to be legendary with her.
She's known for being quiet, reserved, but also principled.
Yeah.
Fiercely independent.
Absolutely. You know, Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, he once said something really telling about her. He said, Yellen has something very few people in Washington have. No one in the world distrusts her.
Wow. That's quite the endorsement.
And there was this quote from a U.S. administration official saying, basically, Yellen says what she believes, and if you think you can push her to say something she's not comfortable with, well, good luck with that.
And that independence, we saw it play out, didn't we? Like with Donald Trump. He didn't renominate her as Fed chair.
Right, because she stood her ground on the Dodd-Frank Act, that big financial reform law passed after the 2008 crisis.
Yeah, aimed at preventing another meltdown, more regulation, more oversight.
And Trump and his Treasury Secretary Mnuchin wanted to roll parts of it back. Yellen famously told him essentially, over my dead body.
So that independence, is it purely a strength or can it be a liability in Washington?
Mostly a superpower, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, she put sound policy ahead of politics, which can definitely rub administrations the wrong way sometimes.
Like with Trump. He probably saw her resistance on Dodd-Frank as just getting in the way.
Probably.
Yeah.
But for people who value, institutional integrity, that's exactly why she's so respected. It's rare.
Her path to getting these huge jobs is pretty amazing, too. She was born in Brooklyn back in 1946.
Right. High school valedictorian. Apparently, she interviewed herself for the school paper.
Huh. Seriously. Okay, that's interesting. And then Brown University, that's where she really got hooked on economics.
Yeah, she initially considered math anthropology,
Yeah.
but economics won out at Brown, graduated in '67.
Then off to Yale for her doctorate, inspired by James Tobin, another big name in economics.
Right. Got her PhD in '71, started teaching at Harvard, and, the story about meeting her husband.
Oh, yeah, George Akerlof, Nobel Prize winner himself.
They met in the Federal Reserve cafeteria in 1977. Talk about an economic power couple.
No kidding. So her career just keeps climbing. Economist at the Fed, then faculty at Berkeley. That's where the earthquake happened.
Uh-huh.
Then back to the Fed in '94 as a governor on the board. And then the historic firsts start piling up. First woman to chair the President's Council of Economic Advisors under Clinton.
Then, first woman to chair the Federal Reserve under Obama in 2014.
And now, first woman to be U.S. Treasury Secretary under Biden.
And here's the really unique part. She is the only person in American history to have held all three of those jobs. Council of Economic Advisors chair, Fed chair, and Treasury Secretary.
That's incredible. Just nobody else has that trifecta.
Nobody. Plus, just last December, her signature started appearing on the dollar bills, the $1 and $5 bills. First woman ever to have her name on U.S. currency like that.
So with that kind of resume, that kind of history, it makes sense she'd be central to the U.S. response when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Absolutely. So let's jump to November 2021. This is before the invasion, but the intelligence is pointing that way.
Right. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, calls this crucial meeting in the White House Situation Room. Top intelligence people, national security officials.
And they've got a real problem, a dilemma. Ukraine isn't in NATO, so there's no treaty obligation for direct military intervention.
Plus, the American public was just tired of war after Afghanistan and Iraq. 20 years of it.
And the biggest risk, the unthinkable risk, is direct military conflict with Russia, a nuclear-armed Russia, with Putin, whose reactions are, let's say, hard to predict. So direct military action, off the table.
But just standing by wasn't really an option either, right? Especially with NATO allies bordering Ukraine.
No. So the decision was made, respond economically, use economic weapons. And the goal was huge, not just some mild sanctions like they did back in 2014 after Crimea.
This was different.
Way different. The stated ambition was, quote, turning the entire global economy against Russia.
Wow. Okay. And Janet Yellen gets pulled into that Situation Room meeting specifically to figure out how to actually do that?
Exactly. She's the one tasked with designing this economic warfare strategy.
So how did the plan unfold?
Well, things started moving fast. Early February 2022, just weeks before the invasion, 3 U.S. officials fly to Brussels.
To coordinate with the Europeans.
Right. Finalizing plans for export restrictions. The U.S. had like a 38-page list of goods to restrict. The EU had a 63-page list. So lots of detailed planning on that front.
Initially, the focus was on blocking exports to Russia, but then the invasion happens, February 24th.
And everything changes. Remember President Zelensky's video plea to the EU leaders, saying it might be the last time they saw him alive.
Yeah, that was incredibly powerful.
It really galvanized the Europeans. They demanded tougher sanctions. And that's when the focus shifted dramatically.
To the Russian central bank's money.
Exactly. Over $630 billion in foreign reserves. Most of it held in banks in the U.S., the EU, and Japan.
So the idea was to freeze it, just lock it up so Russia couldn't use it.
That was the idea. But here's something interesting. Yellen, known for being careful, rational. She was apparently hesitant at first.
Really? Why? It seemed like the obvious move.
Well, she was worried about the precedent. If the U.S. freezes the reserves of another country's central bank, would other central banks get spooked? Would they stop holding their assets in dollars or in the U.S.?
Ah, okay. Worried it could undermine the dollar's role as the world's main reserve currency.
Precisely. That status gives the U.S. enormous financial power. She didn't want to jeopardize that long-term stability. It's a huge consideration.
So what changed her mind? Or who?
Well, her advisors, people like Jake Sullivan and his deputy Dileep Singh, who was really the architect of targeting the central bank, they were much more gung-ho.
They pushed for it.
Yeah. But the real tipping point seems to have been a phone call. On Saturday, February 26th, Mario Draghi, who was Italy's prime minister then.
Ah, Draghi, former head of the European Central Bank. He knows finance.
Exactly. He called Yellen directly and basically urged her, we need to move fast on this. The geopolitical urgency, that immediate need to act, seemed to outweigh the longer-term financial stability concerns in that moment.
And so they did it.
They did. Yellen and her team worked flat out through that weekend. And then, just hours before the financial markets opened, on Monday, February 28th, it was 12:30 a.m., in Brussels, the G7 countries announced it. They were freezing the Russian central bank's reserves.
A massive, massive economic blow. And just the start, really. Yellen has been coordinating sanctions ever since, right? Like 9 rounds of them with the Europeans.
That's right. It's been an ongoing effort led by her. Okay, so now let's switch gears. Let's talk about the person on the other side of this economic battlefield.
Elvira Nabiullina.
Elvira Nabiullina, governor of Russia's central bank. And, she's widely seen as Janet Yellen's equal in many ways, one of the world's best central bank governors.
Also known for being calm, reserved, deeply experienced.
Very much so. A similar profile in terms of demeanor and competence.
And she certainly needed that competence because the initial hit from those sanctions...
It was brutal, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Within just 2 weeks of the war starting, by March 7th, 2022, the Russian ruble had lost half its value against the dollar. 50%. Gone. And the predictions for the whole Russian economy were just dire. Yellen herself said it would be ruined.
Right. And major financial institutions like the Institute of International Finance, they were forecasting a huge contraction, like 15% shrinkage of the Russian economy in 2022.
15%. That's Great Depression territory. It looked like a total economic collapse was coming.
It really did. But then something truly surprising happened.
The turnaround.
Yes. Thanks to Nabiullina's actions, she moved incredibly fast and decisively.
What did she do?
Well, she jacked up interest rates immediately, all the way to 20%, imposed really strict capital controls, basically making it incredibly hard for money to leave Russia.
Okay, standard crisis moves, but aggressive.
Very aggressive. And crucially, she mandated that payments for Russia's gas exports, a huge source of income, had to be made in rubles.
Ah, forcing demand for the currency. Clever.
Yeah. Extremely clever. And it worked astonishingly well. By June 2022, just a few months later, the ruble hadn't just recovered. It hit a 7-year high against the dollar. It was actually the world's strongest performing currency against the dollar up to that point in the year.
That's incredible. From a 50% collapse to a 7-year high in months.
Incredible is the word. And the resilience wasn't just the currency. The overall economy held up way better than anyone expected.
Right. You said the prediction was a 15% crash. What actually happened?
In 2022, the Russian economy contracted by only 2.1%.
Only 2.1 after all that. That's way less than even the Russian government itself was expecting, right?
Way less. And it completely defied those Western forecasts of ruin.
And the surprises didn't stop there, did they? What about 2023?
Even more startling, perhaps, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is now projecting that the Russian economy will actually grow this year.
Grow, despite the war, despite the sanctions.
Grow, and potentially faster than both Germany and the UK's economies this year.
Okay, that is genuinely shocking. How is that possible?
Look, there's no doubt the sanctions have inflicted severe damage. There are deep structural problems being created. But that immediate collapse didn't happen. And the resilience, avoiding that free fall, is largely credited to Nabiullina and her team's quick, decisive, and often unorthodox actions.
So we have these two figures, Yellen and Nabiullina, architects of opposing economic strategies, and the tension is clearly still there.
Very much so. Remember that G20 finance ministers meeting back in February 2023.
Yeah, Yellen made some pretty pointed remarks, didn't she? Even though Nabiullina wasn't actually in the room.
Right. Yellen said that Russian officials participating in the meeting were, quote, complicit with Putin and shared responsibility for the lives lost in Ukraine. It was a very direct message, even delivered indirectly.
Wow. So when you step back from this whole deep dive, what does it really tell us?
Well, I think it shows, maybe more clearly than ever, just how powerful economic policy can be as a weapon in global conflict, the sheer pressure that can be applied.
But it also shows the limits, right? Or at least the surprising resilience economies can have, even under that extreme pressure.
Exactly. It's not always predictable. And it really underscores the critical role of these key individuals, people like Yellen and Nabiullina. Their decisions, their character, their quiet influence, it shapes huge global events.
It's not just abstract policy. There's a real human element to these high-stakes choices, strategic decisions with massive real-world impacts.
Absolutely. These aren't just numbers on a screen.
So it leaves us with a really interesting thought, maybe a provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. Given Yellen's direct challenge, that accusation of complicity, and just the immense ongoing pressure, will Elvira Nabiullina, the woman who steered Russia away from economic collapse, eventually decide she's had enough? Will she resign?
It's a fascinating question. What do you think?